Today we are going to continue our giant opponent previews. We usually save the three NFC East teams for last, and the first one up in the division are the Dallas Cowboys. And joining us to talk about the Dallas Cowboys, friend of the show, good buddy of ours, Mickey Spagnola from DallasCowboys.com. Mickey, it's not often that we actually get to talk to guys at training camp, but you arrived in beautiful Oxnard, California yesterday, and you guys are ready to roll.
Yeah, absolutely. Lovely Oxnard, California, where when I woke up this morning, it was 62 degrees. Eat your heart out, right? It was a nice bike ride. I think it was me and the guys working in the fields picking crops. So great morning. Cowboys are going to have their camp opening press conference with Jerry, Steven, and Mike McCarthy in about an hour. And that'll kind of officially kick off training camp here.
Well, Mickey, that's great. So I'm going to start with a really basic question. What's the first thing at the first training camp practice that your eyes are going to dart to?
Well, you know, and I hate to have to qualify my answer, but as you guys know, that first training camp practice and the second one and probably the third one is no different than what we saw in OTAs and mini camps, right? Helmets, jerseys, shorts. You know, I think what those first couple days will serve, the purpose they'll serve is we'll see how everybody's lining up, like where they're putting certain guys first or second, especially on defense. You know, this offense is basically settled. There's really not any competition for starting jobs on the offense, I don't think. Defensively, I think it's an all-comers meet. You know, everything's open, aside from DeMarcus Lawrence, Randy Gregory, and probably Trayvon Diggs. But all the other spots, I think it's wide open. So keeping an eye on the defense, because the defense is what, you know, caused this team to go 6-10 last year. And so keeping an eye on who they're playing where and in what order they're playing them in.
Well, Mickey, let's stay with the defense because obviously that is the biggest storyline, and it's not just the new personnel. It's also the fact that they have a new defensive coordinator in Dan Quinn taking over from Mike Nolan. So I think the big question is, does he have the personnel to implement his scheme that he's run, whether it be in Seattle or Atlanta, and what do you think is going to be the identity of this Dallas defense this year?
Yeah, I think Dan Quinn may be one of the most important offseason acquisitions the Cowboys had. The defense, you know, to put it mildly, was a mess last year. I thought it was disorganized. I thought they had guys playing in their wrong positions, asking them to do things that I don't think that was the best to ask them to do. So he needs to make a difference. They gave up more points than any team in Cowboy history last year, 473. If they can just be average and the offense plays the way it's capable of playing with Dak Prescott back at quarterback, not having to play four quarterbacks like they did last year, with the offensive line back intact, Blake Jarwin back at tight end, you know, they should be pretty prolific offensively. But you're right. The defense is what's got to come through. I think just watching in the offseason, I think Dan Quinn seems more organized. The guys seem to understand the scheme. They seem to understand their responsibilities better. And, well, they should, because they had an offseason, right? They didn't have an offseason last year for Mike Nolan to implement whatever he was trying to do. Didn't have any, preseason. So I just think that the personnel was not as bad as the results. I just think what they were trying to do was way too confusing for the guys on the field.
Usually we like to start up front with the personnel on defense, Mickey, but I think the linebacker position is actually one of the more fascinating things to watch with the Cowboys this year. How many linebackers are they going to try to get on the field at the same time? Because it seems like they have a lot of them, and I'm not sure how they're going to utilize all these guys. Talk to me about it.
And that's what we'll get a better idea in training camp, because in minicamp and OTAs they were rotating guys in and out, moving guys around. So I don't think what we saw settled anything. But it'll be interesting to see how they integrate Leighton Vander Esch coming back healthy, Jalen Smith, Micah Parsons, Jabril Cox, and then the thought that they were going to use Keanu Neal, the safety that they signed from Seattle, as a hybrid linebacker. So I think there could be one of the ways to get all these guys on the field is to have different packages, almost kind of a matchup thing. Maybe something like in basketball, you got these guys on the court. Okay, I'm going to play these guys. So I think that could be what's coming. We'll see. I know everybody wants to know where they're going to play Micah Parsons, and my standard answer to that is on the field. I don't care where you put him, which position you put him at, just get him on the field.
And by the way, I should point out, Lance, just very quickly, we had you on, Mickey, for our mock draft this year, and and it's funny, you spent I think 2/3 of it saying, Micah Parsons makes a lot of sense, and then I think eventually you ended up picking a cornerback for him, which they ended up not being up on the board, by the way. But you ended up being right, man. You had your radar up for Micah Parsons, Mickey, and that's the guy they went with.
Hey, Lance, the funny thing was he asked me who the Cowboys are going to take, and he's right. I went on and on about Micah Parsons, and John finally stopped me and said, I don't care who you want to take. I want to know who the Cowboys are going to take. Well, they finally listened to me.
There you go. From that standpoint, they did. They had their ear to the lines in terms of Big Blue Kickoff Live, which is certainly good to hear. You brought up Keanu Neal, Mickey. I want to expand on that because I think you brought up an interesting point that maybe it wasn't the personnel last year. It was the fact that guys just didn't really buy in or understand the convoluted scheme. So if we take that a step further, okay, Keanu Neal and DeMonte Casey both have ties to Dan Quinn. Both have played within his system in Atlanta. I understand there's some injury history to be concerned, but there is that familiarity factor. I'm curious what you think about the value of those two guys in particular in helping everybody further understand this scheme and being in the right spots more consistently throughout the season compared to what we saw last year.
Yeah, and I think that certainly will help Dan Quinn. Now, just from Dan Quinn's standpoint, and just listening to the players from the off season, he's already been a hit. They love him. They understand him. He understands them. And I'll give you one little example. They were doing a drill, in the rookie Quentin Bohanna kind of twisted his back or neck or something like that, and he stepped out. And they were short on enough defensive linemen. I guess this must have been the rookie camp. Enough defensive linemen to continue doing what they're doing. So Dan Quinn turned his hat around and jumped in and played nose tackle for a couple plays. And then Bohanna, who's got a great personality, by the way, went in and tapped him out, said, Coach, I'm ready. Get out of here. So they have already bonded with him. So I think that helps. I think it helps to have those two veterans that kind of understand Dan Quinn, know what they want, and they seem to be two selfless guys because, they're only here on one-year contracts, basically.
Yeah.
And you could get very selfish, and it's like, okay, I got to look out for number one here, but they seem to be helping the other guys, and I think that's going to go a long way to implementing this defense.
A lot of people, Mickey, think about Dan Quinn in Seattle with the Legion of Boom, but he at heart is a guy, his history is up front, right? He's a defensive line guy, and I don't think the Cowboys have gotten the level of production they would have liked from DeMarcus Lawrence, at least in terms of sacks, since he signed that big contract. I think his level of play in other areas has been strong, but the sacks haven't come. Now you have Randy Gregory, who seems to finally kind of have things put together. How important is that pass rush going to be for this defense, given the youth they have in the secondary? And do you think they can achieve the type of goals that they're hoping for?
Yeah, I think that they can. I think Randy Gregory will make a significant difference, not only at that right defensive end spot, but I think that'll cause offenses to take a little pressure off of DeMarcus Lawrence. Because last year, the way they were playing, it's like, okay, I'm not letting DeMarcus Lawrence ruin my offense. I will take care of him. and I'll deal with whatever else they throw at me. And the Cowboys really didn't have much to throw at them. So, yeah, I think that, the pass rush that was less than average last year, I think is going to be better. But, John, here's the deal. They were second to last in run defense.
Right.
So if you don't stop the run, as Rod Marinelli used to tell us, then you don't earn the right to rush the quarterback. And that, to me, is number one. They've got to do a better job of stopping the run. I mean, they were giving up almost 5 yards a carry. You can't win games like that. I mean, do the math. 2 times 5 is a first down. So that run defense has to improve, and that doesn't just include that defensive front. That includes the linebackers, too. And hopefully they've got Leighton Vander Esch back in the spot that I think he's best at on the weak side. And then we'll see. Let Jalen Smith and Micah Parsons compete for that middle linebacker spot, and maybe the loser plays the strong if indeed they ever go back on the field with 3 linebackers, which they never did last year, right? I don't care if teams played 2 tight ends. I don't care if it was 3rd and 2. They were playing 2 tight ends. They never went heavy against a heavy offensive formation. And I got tired of seeing some skinny cornerback or safety up on the, up there trying to stop the run at 210, 220 pounds when I got a 310, 50-pound linebacker coming off the line at me. So we'll see how that also plays out, and if they use a combination of a 4-3 and a 3-4.
Yeah, Mickey, you bring up a great point about the run defense. 160 yards per game they nearly surrendered per contest. Hard to win football games, hard to get after the quarterback. You mentioned it's a team effort in terms of the guys up front as well as the linebackers, but I want to get more into the interior defensive linemen. You were talking about Randy Gregory and DeMarcus Lawrence. How do they feel about what they are working with at the defensive tackle position? Because Tristan Hill is now entering a critical year 3 here. Carlos Watkins they bring in from the Houston Texans, and you referenced they drafted 8 guys, 2 of which play on the interior. So how do they feel about that group making an impact, making a name for themselves, maybe not necessarily getting after the quarterback, but at least helping do some of the dirty work on the interior?
Yeah, I think they're hopeful, but again, that's what we're here at training camp to find out, because I don't think anything's set at defensive tackle. They've got 6, 7 guys that can play inside, along with some of these defensive ends they have that could move inside in pass rush situations. So I think that's what we're going to find out. I don't think it'll be interesting how they start off. Because and generally, as you guys know, what coaches do, especially early in the off season and then early in camp, is they give deference to guys that have the experience. Right? You get to go out there first. I think the competition there is going to be great. You mentioned Tristan Hill. He's coming off his torn ACL. I think physically he's ready, but it'll be interesting to see if they take that slow and slow play it. Maybe he ends up on PUP. I don't know, just to start off to see where he's at, because he spent the off season basically rehabbing. He didn't get into any of the team drills or anything like that. So I'll be interested to see how they treat him. You mentioned Watson. They signed Brett Urban. He was kind of a 3-4 defensive end, so he can play inside. He can play outside. And then I think the interesting guy is Bohanna. He's your typical nose tackle. Now, he's a rookie. He didn't go to the 6th round, so maybe we find out why he didn't go till the 6th round. But he's a big body guy. He's 6'4". I'll be interested to see what he weighed in at. He's probably 330, 340, something like that. But the interesting thing about him that I saw in the off-season workouts is he can move. He's not your big slobber knocker that can't, take but one step and that's it. He can move. So I'll be interested to see. The competition, and I keep saying this, the competition on defense I think is going to be the highlight of training camp, because I just don't think anything is given, not only for starting positions, but just to make this team. So that's going to be the interesting thing. And the best thing is, as I pointed out in my season preview, there's no brother-lawing going on here. These defensive coaches are basically new. John mentioned, Quinn as the defensive coordinator, but he's also the defensive line coach. George Edwards, who was basically a defensive special assistant last year, looks like he's taken over the linebacker spot. And then they brought in Joe Witt Jr., who had worked with Mike McCarthy in Green Bay to help in the secondary. So you've got three significant defensive coaches that are going to have a big say in what goes on that defense. And these guys haven't played for them before, except if you had been in Atlanta. So I think everybody who goes out there has got to prove themselves. And I think that's a good thing. No one's going to be sitting there going, well, I got this, because not many guys on defense got anything right now.
And we will get to the offense in a second, Mickey, but we should touch on the secondary. You mentioned it. What do you think this is going to look like from both a personnel and a scheme perspective? I think we all expect Trayvon Diggs to be one of the starters. Beyond that, what are we looking at here? Just give me the overview.
Well, I think from the start, you'll see Trayvon Diggs on one side, Anthony Brown on the other, Jordan Lewis in the slot, and then let the competition begin. Kelvin Joseph, their second-round pick, missed a lot in the offseason. So I don't know. A lot of people think he's a step-in starter. Well, he's going to have to take a lot of steps before he earns a starting job. And maybe it's one of those things where they go with the experience and then let that kid kind of prove himself, see what he can do. And same thing maybe in the slot. In the offseason, their third round pick, Nashawn Wright, really stepped up and caused some ears to perk up, like, ooh, look at this guy. He's always doing something with the ball. And I see where he just signed his contract yesterday. I was thinking, hey, you're a third-round pick, the third-round pick, right? And a lot of people thought you should have been a sixth or seventh, and you still didn't get a contract signed? Seriously? So that got done. So he's going to be a guy kind of to keep your eye on at the cornerback spot. And so is Maurice Kennedy. He opted out last year. They had signed him as somewhat of a veteran corner last year, and then he didn't play. So there'll be some competition there. Nothing's given. And I think the same thing at the safety position. They started off in the offseason with KZ and Jaron Curse, and we'll see how that works out. Donovan Wilson was nursing an injury. He started 10 games last year. So, again, there'll be some competition at safety, too. So a lot of things got to be sorted out during this training camp.
And is it too simple to just say, oh, Dan Quinn, cover 3, a lot of zone stuff? Is this going to be a much bigger mix than what people might think?
Yeah, I think so. I think you'll see both. I think, they've got some guys with capability of playing man, but also, we never look at it this way, but you also have the capability to play zone and play zone right.
Yep.
And a lot of times last year when they were trying to zone, guys were getting lost. And a lot of the breakdowns in pass coverage last year were mistakes. Guys just weren't where they were supposed to be. It's one thing to get physically beat. You can kind of deal with that. But when you're blowing assignments the way they did, and maybe to be expected since, you didn't have any off-season work. You had a rookie starting at one of the corners. Your best corner, Chidobe Awuzie, was injured. He gets in there, he plays, and then got injured again. And so you had a lot of new faces in that secondary, and they paid the price for it.
We're talking with Mickey Spagnola, covers the Cowboys for DallasCowboys.com. Mickey, I want to switch gears to the offensive side of the ball. And while Dak Prescott's returning from injury, I think the bigger storyline is the state of the offensive line, which you alluded to earlier because of all the injuries that they had to deal with. Connor Williams, the only player to start all 16 games last season. So two-part question here. Health-wise, how does Tyron Smith, Lyle Collins, and Zach Martin look as you get set for training camp? And how good do they feel about the depth chart this year, considering a lot of guys got experience last year in case they need to fill in again?
Yeah, I think the three guys that you mentioned, again, out of abundance of caution, they didn't take part in any of the team-type drills in the offseason. But watching them rehab, they looked awfully good. Tyron Smith was running really well. La'el Collins did most of his rehab from the hip surgery, working with Dak Prescott, and he had to work hard to keep up, right, when they were doing their rehab, and he was running well. Zach Martin will be just fine. You know, it was a calf muscle. He's recovered from that. So if you think about it, you had two Pro Bowlers, arguably all pros, playing 4 games. And the 4 games actually, I take that back, playing 2 games, Tyron Smith, and he didn't finish either one of them. And then Zach Martin misses 6, and they had to move him out to tackle because the tackles they thought they were going to try and survive with, 2 undrafted guys, one an undrafted rookie, one an undrafted second-year player, struggled. So, again, if you get the 5 guys they want out there, including Tyra Biadasz, who, to me, had earned that starting center job after Joe Looney got hurt, and then he gets hurt, and Joe Looney came back, and I think just to have some continuity, they left him in there at center, but didn't re-sign him. And you mentioned Connor Williams. So you get those 5 guys on the line, they're in good shape. Now, the big question is who's the backup swing tackle? And that's been a pain in the Cowboys' side for the last 4 years because whoever they've picked has not really worked out. Now, they did sign Ty Nsekhe, a veteran, in the offseason. But, again, if you look at the contract, it's not like they said, okay, you've got this job. They're going to have to earn it. And we'll see if the struggles that Brandon Knight and Terrence Steele went through last year and the number of games they started, if it pays off and if they're capable enough of competing for that backup swing tackle spot. But in my books, if somebody doesn't really step up, the first time one of those tackles gets hurt, then Zach Martin's my backup tackle. He moves outside and Connor McGovern moves to guard. You know, they waited and waited and waited last year for McGovern to be ready and then moved Martin to the tackle position. So, again, it'll be interesting to see if somebody can win that job or if they know that in their hip pocket they've got Zach Martin who can play tackle in an emergency situation.
Couple more minutes with Mickey Spagnola. Mickey, I've read a lot about how Ezekiel Elliott is, best shape of his life. He looks great. Is this just normal off-season stuff we should take with a grain of salt and wait and see, or is this real?
He looked good in the workouts. But, again, if you had trouble last year because of a beat-up offensive line, right, and having to play so many inexperienced guys and they couldn't protect the quarterback, what makes you think they did any better run blocking?
Good point.
Right? This guy's getting hit at the line of scrimmage time after time after time. And I know he had troubles holding on to the football. But one of his problems was he wasn't settling for 2- and 3-yard gains. He's fighting for another yard or two, and the ball was getting knocked out when he needed to realize, okay, I'll live to play another down, right? And he started losing the football. You know, I get it. His average went down to 4 yards a game, but the team average went down too because they just couldn't run the football. There weren't holes there. He was getting hit time after time. And I'll guarantee you, he nearly gained 1,000 yards. I know that's not a big benchmark anymore with the problems they had. And think about this. When you're playing 4 different quarterbacks and you lose Dak Prescott, if I'm a defensive coordinator, I'm sitting there going, 21's not beating me. I'll take my chances on the quarterback beating me,
sure,
but 21 is not going to beat me running the football. And I think that led to some of the problems also.
Yeah, it's a very good point. Mickey, we know about this receiving core, so I really don't think there's much to examine. They have the triple-headed monster. Those guys have been fairly consistent. CeeDee Lamb had an impressive rookie campaign. I want to focus on the tight end position because that was an area that was thrown a curveball when Blake Jarwin went down early in the season with a torn ACL. And listen, Giants fans know him firsthand. It seems like he scored every single career touchdown against the Giants over the last few years. What does his return, you think, add to this Cowboys offense, and how much more could they perhaps get out of the tight end position, given the fact that they were impacted by injuries there last season?
Yeah, I think it created some depth for this year because Dalton Schultz, I think, kind of surprised everybody, ending up with 63 catches. And the Cowboys haven't had many tight ends in their history not named Jason Witten with at least 60 catches in a season, right? He's not quite as a dynamic receiver as Blake Jarwin, as you guys just pointed out, the guy that can kind of get down the field. So I think if they want to go to tight end, it's going to create more problems for defenses. You know, they know what Blake Jarwin can hurt them down the hash, but they can't just assume that Dalton Schultz now is just out there to block. And so we just got to worry about this guy because the other guy's going to block. They can get to the tight ends in the pattern too. And you're right. How much of an impact can the tight end position make when you've got three receivers, if they're all healthy, that can get down the field and do what they did last year, and knowing they did it with Dak Prescott only playing 4 3/4 games. So that's why I think this offense can be very versatile, very potent, if indeed they can keep those offensive tackles on the field.
Mickey, final question. Dak Prescott, should there be any concern about the injury anymore, number one? And number two, have you successfully made the transition about whether or not he's going to sign his contract to whether his contract's going to allow the team to add players so they can win with that contract, which I'm sure that's starting already?
Well, yeah, and I mean, they're fine for this year. We'll see what happens going forward. But the way they structured the contract, they can make an adjustment to his base salary next year to allow them to create some more salary cap space to do what they need to do next year. This year, they're right at it, but I think they're happy with where it goes. You know. And I don't think there's concern. I mean, I see Dak doing his rehab. I see what he was capable of doing. You know, they slow played it, didn't put him in any team situations where there was a pass rush, and he was moving just fine. And so from an injury standpoint, you know, I'm sure they'll take it slow in training camp, but he's ready to go. He's chomping at the bit to get back out there. The question is, who's the backup quarterback? And last year we found out, or let's put it this way, they were reminded how important the backup quarterback is.
Sure.
Right? And so now they've got three guys that combined for 2 NFL starts. So there's going to be competition there. And, you know, they can, you know, thank their lucky stars that they're playing the extra preseason game to kind of help sort that out. But I'm not precluding that, you know, some team lets a veteran quarterback go that has more experience, that they don't bring that guy in, maybe at the end of training camp to see if someone that kind of perks their interest gets released. But again, you're talking 2 guys on that squad that have started 2 games in the NFL combined, and both were last year. So that doesn't give me a lot of security feelings at that spot. So I would be a little bit more worried about that spot than the ability of Dak to move around. And by the way, I don't think I told you guys this, John. Last year in May, I got hit right in my bicycle, and I tore my Achilles.
Oh, geez.
Wow.
And as it turned out, the surgeon that fixed my Achilles was the same guy that fixed Dak. So I said, I can vouch for the guy doing a good job, because if he could fix me, then, you know, if he could fix Dak, then he could fix me. And he did a pretty good job on Dak right now. And I remember at one point, you know, I said, so how's he going to do? Back to normal? He goes, that was the objective. So I think Dak's ankle is good to go. And by the way, I was riding my bike this morning, so my Achilles is good to go too.
Very good, Mick. And by the way, if you want to comment very quickly, Lance and I, when we were filming, when we were getting you back up, basically think Dallas can be okay if their defense is decent. What are the expectations down there in Dallas? Are they like thinking, okay, win the division, maybe win a playoff round? We all know how demanding Cowboy fans can be, very similar to what Giant fans are. What's the level of expectation here for fans with this Cowboy team this year?
Yeah, I think the ones that are somewhat unreasonable are still pretty pessimistic about how good this team can be. I think for the ones that want to look inside of some of the stuff we talked about that helped cause 6-10, I think, and for my expectations, the last thing we did on DallasCowboys.com is what are your expectations of the Cowboys this year? And I think my first line was sky high.
Wow.
Because I just feel like Dan Quinn can make a difference on that defense. And as you guys were saying when I got back with you, if they could just be average in this offense. Remember this offense in the first 5 games.
Yeah.
It was averaging 32 points a game. And somebody pointed to me, big deal. They were 2-3. I go, yeah, they were 2-3 because the defense was giving up 36 points a game. So if that offense if that's for real and the defense could just be average, I think that the expectations on this team from inside is definitely to win the division. But I guess everybody starts off this time of year with that exact goal.
And it's the NFC East, so as we all know, Mick, it's usually the team you least expect to win the division is the team that ends up winning it. So we'll see what happens this year. Enjoy Oxnard, my friend. Hit that practice field. We're about a week behind you. We'll be starting about this time next week out here in New Jersey. Thanks, Mick.
Thanks, Mickey.
Anytime, John. Lance, good to be with you guys.